Awesome. Just little intros on the call. Taryn is like my right-hand dude, does a lot with especially tech and ops and CRMs and driving a lot of that whole processes side of things. Ben is right underneath Taryn, works alongside of Taryn in a lot of those veins. Savannah, who's on the call as well for my team, does a lot with Pedro Deo and with other clients with customer experience and a lot from operations from that side of things. And obviously has some specialties. And then Kimberly is also from one of our other clients, Stephen Diaz from Rainmakers. And so they've got a couple other people maybe joining in. So whether you're joining us today live or if you're watching the recording later, I know a lot of people consume these later on the recording. So welcome this morning. Taryn Turner, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm a little bit worried about the naming conventions going on in this room right now. Now that we have an Aaron, Taryn, and Darren, I just hope we don't get a Karen.
Yes, you know, we can. Man, nobody wants a Karen. Nobody wants a Karen. You know what I'm saying? Not at Christmas time. So, yes, that's the best. Taryn and Aaron, we typically only hire people that our names rhyme, but we let Ben and Savannah in. It was kind of a misjudgment. But Taryn, I like your Christmas sweater. Looking nice this morning.
It's not a Christmas sweater though, it's a winter sweater. There are no Christmas trees, there's no Santas, there's no gifts. It's winter sweater.
Well, it's sharp all the same. I like this time of season when you bring those back.
Can we compromise and call it a Yule sweater?
Yes, a Yule sweater.
Can I wear it after Christmas?
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, there's a sweater I've got that Megan's like, hey, you can wear that probably into January, but don't wear it any further than that. So I got one of those too. Ben, you doing good this morning? Baron.
My name is Baron, actually, and I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Awesome. Savannah, our new little Amelia is doing good. Savannah just had a baby, for those of you who don't know, and she's jumping on our calls, even though she's being kind of bad. Look at that. Amelia's in nurturing mode. I love it. She doing good for you? Is sleeping going okay? She's still doing all right with that?
Yeah, she her biggest thing right now is that she hates being put down. So I had just gotten her to sleep, but she heard me talking and then immediately was like, oh my gosh, I'm sleeping and not being held at the same time. So so now I'm holding her because she was not going to let that go.
I love it. Great. Well, I'm glad you're able to hold her and hang out. Ben, I don't like being put down either, so don't talk trash on me. All righty, guys. Today, we're going to be looking at a couple of different tools we talked about last week. This is the third week in. If you are just joining us, you haven't missed much yet. We talked about Gap Analyzer week 1. Last week, we talked about org chart, job descriptions, how they tie back into Gap. This week, we're going to talk about a tool we had rolled out last week called Delegate and Elevate, which is actually part of the EOS toolbox. EOS is Entrepreneur's Operating System from the book Traction by Gino Wickman. You'll probably get tired of hearing me saying that over and over again, but a lot of our tools come straight from EOS because we feel like they all dovetail together really well. And I know, Kimberly, I was just on a call with you earlier this week with L10, which is part of the EOS model as well. So you're going to see more and more of that. So we rolled this tool out last week, and it's called Delegate and Elevate. And we talked about the 4 quadrants a little bit as far as this typically is something that we'll roll out once we've done a gap analyzer, as we're trying to identify where people fit in the org chart and are their job descriptions really lining up with what they're actually doing. What we found is job descriptions can a lot of times become moot, and you can just become a catch-all. And then if there's not some sort of evaluation done at some point in time throughout the year, then a lot of times people start moving outside the scope. And what that can lead to is overwhelm, can lead to frustration, can lead to breakdown in communication from the top to the bottom. So we encourage people to go through these at least once a year, just to really shake it down and say, hey, how are you feeling about where you're at? How are you feeling about your job? How are you feeling about living up to what your job description is calling out? So, and sometimes we'll push people through them more than once a year. If I'm starting to see people burn out, or I'm starting to see people starting to, they show up at meetings a little more frustrated or a little more tired, or like something's going on, obviously following up with an eval, but I'll push them through this and say, hey, let's talk about a Delegate and Elevate. And because a lot of times there are things that live in this quarter that just aren't really probably part of their role, or if it is part of their role, we could probably get them some help. We want people to live up here in their brilliance, and everything else kind of trickles down, so there's going to be things that you like and are good at. There's going to be things that you don't like, but you're still good at, and you're probably, going to be carrying some of those things. That's what makes work, right? Not hobbies. But this zone here, as little as we can get people to live here, is going to make people happier. And the thing that we found is that there are a lot of things that might live here for me that wouldn't live here for Darren or wouldn't live here for Kimberly or somebody else on my team. Just because I hate it doesn't mean everybody hates it, you know. And there are, the beauty of teams is that you can roll things down to other people, you know, and that oftentimes is what helps you to elevate other folks, you know, delegating things down, delegating things off that don't fit them well, and elevating them up into a new space in their positions. So we asked Kimberly if she would be our resident guinea pig, and she said that she would. And so she sent me over a version of hers, which she made even better by putting bullet points in and pulled it into Canva, and that's what makes Kimberly the best. And yeah, you could edit the tool. You can edit this tool through any like PDF ads. So you did great, Kimberly. You just made it even better. So good job on making the ads. So Kimberly, are you going to be okay with me kind of pushing some, oh, good reminder, Ben, in the chat as you have questions? Ben, you're so good. You can drop in your questions in the Slido link there. It's just a spot for you to ask questions throughout. And then after we talk about the tools, after we talk about some things, we usually leave the latter part of the call for question and answer, where you can be laser coached on things that you have particular to your business. So thank you, Ben. That's in the chat. You can grab that there. So Kimberly, thank you for filling this out for us. Let's go through some of your things. So I'm just going to read them down the list, and then I'll ask you about certain ones throughout. Is that going to work okay? Perfect. So love and great at organizing, structure, details, problem solving, SOP creation, developing processes, planning, accountability, building tech systems and automations, and sending gifts. I like that one. That's a good one. Like it. So can I just say this? And my wife is not too far away, so I got to say it kind of close. I don't like sending gifts. I'm not good at sending gifts. I carry so much stress around sending gifts. Like I'm like, man, are they going to like it? Are they not going to like it? And then like it's the stress of I economize my time too tight. And so then to go out shopping or spend time shopping or spend time developing, it always feels like I'm like, oh. So anyway, I love that you added that on there, because that's one that would end up down here for me. But that's awesome. So what do you feel like, Kimberly, when you say SOP creation versus developing processes, in your mind, what's the delineation between those two?
So sometimes so we just started up some new teams, kind of like popcorn, like really fast.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't know what you need until you need it. And so like developing a process, I feel like is a little bit different, because you have to first kind of pinpoint, what do we even need? And then what are we doing? And then like, for me, it's two things, because I have to have like this stuff going on up here first. And then I have to like put it on paper or, you know, a document for an SOP. And in our company, we have a brand new
yes,
SOP
I saw it. It looks so good.
Mother of all SOPs. So it's like this SOP template, because we really want to empower team members to create SOPs, but they need to be done right. And so we have like this is how the mother of all SOPs follows the SOP process. So it's like, here's how to do it, and like watch us do it. And so like putting all the steps in there, and like whether it's screenshots or video, and then it gets peer reviewed, and then it goes to an SOP documenter, and then it goes to a special Loom folder. And like all those steps, I feel like is a totally different thing, because it doesn't have to just be done by one person. But like figuring out that you need a process and kind of what that looks like is sort of like a team leader thing. Yep, but then SOP creation can be done by anyone with proper direction.
That's awesome. No, I think that's super good. And I saw your mother of all SOPs. I thought that was awesome. I think sometimes with like developing processes, like I think that any of us that are process geared always need to keep in mind, most people aren't like us. Like most people's mind don't look like work like us. Most people look at our stuff and they're like, holy hell, like how am I supposed to do? You want me to replicate something like that? And so I think as simple as we can make it and break it down and really spend time there is awesome. And so I think 2 looms, like any kind of instructional video you can put in there. I will say sometimes the pain point of a loom is that it atrophies. You know, maybe if you're showing somebody how to do something on a piece of software, that changes over time. So I think lining it out in steps too, and then realizing you're probably gonna have to revisit those SOPs. Taryn, I know you've done a lot with SOPs, and I know you've helped AYR vet through some of their SOPs over time. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, one of the fun, well, I don't know if it's fun. For Kimberly, it's fun, not for everybody. But one of the great ways they did it at AYR was they'd use Process Street to document their processes. And then they'd have people continually go back through and follow their own processes to make sure they were still up to date. So you can check off as you're going along, you can get to a step and you're like, they changed the wording to this in the app, or this is now in a different section, or we're using a whole new application in general. So they would, yeah, they're constantly going back through their own processes and utilizing their own SOPs. It's not just create it, store it, and forget about it.
Yeah. Process Street is cool. I think, we've tried to replicate some of that. We've used Asana for a lot of our processes, SOPs, where we'll drop in a link, to a Loom with an asset if something needs to be reviewed, and then steps below it. I think the key is anything that you can replicate, right? Like, I think Process Street is cool because you create this master, and then people start new iterations every time they do it. So they're all working off the same master, but every iteration is there, and then it tracks through who did it last, and you can see, did they go through all the steps? Because then if you see a breakdown in how something's turning out, you can be like, hey, we make sure you can go back and really work through the SOP. And so I really like that. We've tried to duplicate it with Asana because we're already paying for one tool, but I think that Process Street is really cool. It's a really cool tool if you haven't seen that. Thank you, Taryn. Ben, any thoughts on your end?
No, that covers it. I mean,
Perfect.
the point of a standard operating procedure is to be able to do it while you're operating on a day-to-day basis. So if it's not up to date, how are you completing your operational duties every day?
I think too, and that's a super good point of a lot of people, they get so overwhelmed, but the best way to be able to delegate stuff off is once you've created an SOP for it, because then you can just cut it loose, right? You're like, hey, I'm not good at this, but I have processed the whole thing out. This is what I think it should look like. And then you're able to hand off somebody something that at least they can operate from, instead of just handing them off a mess. You're like, this sucks, I hate it, like, and pushing at people. Like, nobody likes the feeling of that, and so the best way to elevate is to delegate by using an SOP. So thanks for all that, guys. That's good stuff. So I think obviously we use Colby. I know Steven's team, I think, uses DISC, different assessments of personality, but this is obviously high fact finder, high follow through are people that look like Kimberly. She does an amazing job at what she does. So like and good out for Kimberly is training teams, team leaders, keeping cadence in meetings, tasking out ideas from the visionary, delegating, assigning tasks, and nudging the people along. Those are all key things. And I think as you read this, realize Kimberly fits really well into like what we would call an integrator slot for when it comes to leading teams. There's the visionary, and in EOS's model, at least, there's the visionary and there's an integrator, and usually they're tantamountly different. The visionary has all kinds of energy. He's a high quick start, low fact finder, low follow through, but has all the dreams and the vision. And so you bring in somebody like a Kimberly, or like a lot of us on this call that are an integrator that can really catch people up to speed and fill people in. And we're like reading this list as a visionary, most visionaries reading this list would be like, oh my gosh, don't even use those words around me anymore. Like, they don't like the minutia and depth in some of those words is not, it's like chalk, nails on a chalkboard. But that's, I think, where you're picking it up here, Kimberly, is that whole tasking out ideas, nudging the people along. Like, this is a lot of our job, is just making sure people are doing what they said they were going to do, and doing it in a kind way. Obviously, like if you're just a ramrod, or you like are continually poking at people, pisses people off, but like nudging people in kindness and keeping them moving in the right direction, but at the same time, not letting them off easy. So I think that's great, like and good at. Any thoughts or ideas on this one, Savannah, Ben, Taryn? Is that all good? Kimberly, do you have anything you want to fill us in on that?
Yeah, I've been watching you guys. I forget sometimes that Aaron's like a fly on the wall in our Slack channel, and like he sees everything. So like I don't even know what he knows. But I noticed I've been paying attention to like the communication that you guys use, and Aaron's like, I'm so excited to see you Thursday with your this thing, right? Like, it wasn't like, hey, you get it done and send it to me. It was like, I can't wait to see you with your stuff. I was like, I like that. I'm going to use that.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Right, what do they say? You get more bees with honey than vinegar. As far as like, which I don't even know if is real, because don't bees make the honey anyway. But essentially, it's being sweet's going to be better than being sour. But thank you, Kimberly. That's a kind thing to say.
My question I would have for Kimberly is, what were some of the things in your mind that helped you split up between something you love and something you like? I know I always have a hard time filling that part out. Is like, is this something I love or do I like it?
The space and the blocks. That helped.
You ran out of
but
room.
also- yeah, I ran out of room. But also, like my working hours are different from like most people's. I'm kind of like on Philippine time. So I'm usually working until 1 o'clock in the morning and I sleep in like a lazy American. So it is just what works for my family right now in a season with young children. So when I open up my computer to work, it is very evident what I'm excited to do and what I'm not at that time of day. So like some of these things I'm like, okay, let me nudge these peeps along, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'll set it to like do the next morning because I know it's like midnight. So yeah, that's kind of like just the mindset I'm in. And that's why it took me so long to get this filled out, because I noticed like, if you just ask me this stuff, I'm like crickets. But as I was going through the week and like doing the tasks, it was easier for me to separate it out in that manner instead of like just trying to like brain dump it. So like as I would do these things, I'm like, ooh, I kind of sighed when I had to, you know, assign that thing. It's like I like doing that stuff, but then it's also like this one task that could take me like 30 minutes to just get done. I would have to do it over and over again. But if I spent an hour like doing it well, documenting the process, whatever, then it would be so easy for me to delegate that and just assign like, okay, from now on, you're in charge of like the meeting notes, right? Like you got this, you're awesome. And so that's kind of like, I like it, but it would be so much easier to like just be done with it, right? But in the long term, I think. So yeah. And then also this is a very new role for me. So I've like unofficially been doing some integrator stuff for like about a month or two, kind of like easing into it. And then I guess it's been about almost 3 weeks now of like the official integrator title or whatever. So I'm still kind of like phasing out of some things and phasing into other things. So it's kind of a transitional time period for me. So I had that going in there too with the coaching, but okay, I'm done.
Well, that's good. I love it. I think that's a great turn. Did that answer your question?
Oh yeah. I was happy to hear. I think that helps me organize my tasks too, is sometimes I wake up and I've got the 4 things on my list I'm excited about. And those are the things I really want to do. And then the other 4 things where I want to do, just not first.
And then he sends us to me.
Yeah.
But that's the delegate and elevate, right? Like that's the brilliance. And that's what we're trying to create is cadence, right? Like what things require Kimberly's brilliance, you know, like what things require Taryn's brilliance. And if this isn't something that requires Taryn's brilliance, how fast can he SOP that out and task it down? You know, and a lot of times that's going to be represented. The way the gap analyzer works is you start seeing how people's hours are being spent, you know, and then you can start asking the questions of, hey, does that have to be you? I see that you're maxing, you're redlining. All of us on this call are probably those kind of people that are like, when things are suggested, hey, this needs to get done, a lot of us can jump in and be like, hey, I'll take that on. Hey, it's okay, I'll take that on. But I think that, which is great, that's what has probably promoted you into the place that you're in. But at the same time, you're going to find soon that you become the choking point. Like you can't take any more on. And the best way to identify what you shouldn't be carrying is what doesn't require your brilliance and what don't you love? Like what can you task down? And then the question becomes who could be tasked down, because people are looking for opportunities to elevate up. And they, a lot of times, are honored to take on something that you dread, you know? And so a lot of it's just identifying, you know, what am I good at? And then how can I task it down? Savannah, I feel like you and Kimberly are pretty similarly wired when it comes to some of that kind of stuff. Do you have anything that you wanted to add or anything that you wanted to say to that?
Well, one thing I noticed that I thought was really interesting is that a lot of your things on like and good at, to me, almost read the same way as something that you put in your don't like, that you're good at, which is the coaching. Because like training, nudging, tasking out, like all those things kind of fall into that same category. And yeah, those are all things that like sort of make me uncomfortable sometimes too. And so I guess my question is like almost kind of similar to Taryn's, where it's like where does it cross that box from going from like to dislike? Because they're very I feel like they're kind of on the same line there. Is it just that it's like difficult conversations when you're coaching?
Good question. And also why I have a star by that one.
Yeah.
So in our company, we have boxer coaches, and they primarily focus on the product research phase for this Amazon business building stuff. And you guys, I've been doing this for a year and a half. I loved it when I started. Like, I couldn't get enough of it. I loved it. I would get like 30, 40 students at a time, and they'd be like boom, 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 high momentum. I loved it. Now I have like these things in the upper two quadrants that I'm working on that I'm loving. And the coaching is kind of like, I feel like it's kind of like a ball and chain. Like, it's kind of like pulling me back because on my schedule, I do that in the evenings when I put the kids to bed. It's the first thing I do, right? Because I don't want to be doing this at midnight. And so it's kind of like the, you know, eat the frog first thing. And it's just feeling like, I don't want to eat the frog today. So it's boxer coaching. So it's a lot of talking. And I know I talk a lot here because I love this, but my personality is like just me and my laptop. Like, I don't like, shh, you know, so having to listen to people for hours and then respond the same things over and over. And I'm kind of out of the Amazon space myself now. Like, I almost feel like someone is going to be better at that who's in it. Like, I'm not in it anymore. I'm not in product research. Amazon changes like this. And I'm like, I just don't even feel really like all that qualified to be an Amazon product research coach anymore. So it's the talking, and it's the topic of like the product research that kind of is like, I'm cool with letting that go. And we are phasing out. I have one more live coaching call, which is in bottom right. And then that's the 29th. So I eat that frog, and it'll be the last one of those I have to eat. And then I'll phase out of coaching officially by like the 23rd of January. So super excited to elevate someone else to that.
I think that's a good point to be made, is because I found, like, especially, so Collab started just me, you know what I mean? And then I picked up one guy named Brian, and then I picked up Taryn. And then like the main key of growing, so now we have a team of 12, you know, like the way you continue to grow is to be able to delegate things down. But I found, like, as you delegate things down, you do start feeling like, do I know that stuff anymore? Even though you were the origin, like it all started with you, but you're not doing it in the day-to-day. And it can raise that insecurity of, am I still the expert in this? But I feel like what I found with Taryn, and work, because Taryn has taken things so much further than anything I ever did with CRMs and a lot of the tech side of things. But I think that as long as you have a general working knowledge of how things work, people just want to come to you to bounce ideas off you. And I feel like that's what the Collab team does really well is, hey, let me sit down with your key leaders and let's just have some conversations, because a lot of times they don't have anybody to talk to about the things that they're so wrapped up in. And if you have just a working knowledge of what they're talking through, a lot of times they just need the catharsis to get it out and talk about it and process it. So I think that Kimberly, just some affirmation for you. A lot of times you probably know more than you realize you know, but at the same time, I do think as you fill up your plate with this stuff, it makes some of the other things have to be delegated out, you know, otherwise, like Taryn was becoming the choking point, which was why we brought on Ben, you know, like, and we brought on Savannah because Taryn could only take on so much. And so I think that there's parts where you do need to identify what needs to be delegated down. And it sounds like you've done that. Can I ask you this? Do you use the multi-speed function on Voxer?
I use the multi-speed function on all videos ever.
Okay,
so
good.
If I hear your voice, you're in 2x. It sounds
No,
like I'm listening to chipmunks all day.
I love it. I love it. Some people don't realize that's a function of Voxer. I'm like, let me make your life so much better right now. Megan, my wife's always like, you're going to lose your mind. You can't listen to people that speed all the time. I'm like, baby, I'm economizing right now. You know how much I just got done? I just cut that guy's whole speech in half by putting him on 4 times speed. So anyway, it's funny stuff. Delivering hard news and tough conversations. I mean, some people are wired for it. Some people aren't wired for it. I think like this is part of being a leader, no matter where you're at. So there are spots where you just need to grow into it. And that's probably just, this is a good spot for it to live is, you know, you may not love it, but it's something that we all probably have to get pretty good at if we're going to lead folks. And I think that, did you guys ever see Moneyball? It was that Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill movie. Baseball movie. But anyway, there's a line in that movie that's so great, and it's like a rags to riches story. It was the A's, right? Like the raising up of the A's as a team. But anyway, they were trash team, didn't have much of a budget. Brad Pitt's a true story, not Brad Pitt, but Brad Pitt as the coach, came up with this algorithm using this kid that came out of school of how to pick up players that you wouldn't look at and think that's an A player, and building this team collectively. And he took this team all the way to, you know, top of their game, World Series, I think is where he took them to. But there's this great conversation between Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill. Brad Pitt was the primary coach. Jonah Hill was the assistant. And he's like, okay, so I want you to tell me how you would cut. Thanks, Darren. That's a great spot for it. Like, there's a link in chat Darren just dropped for us, but it's this whole conversation about if you're going to cut somebody, tell me how you're going to do it. And Jonah Hill comes in like the nice guy way. He's like, hey, so we've been thinking, and kind of pussyfooting it around the table, like of the conversation he's going to have. And Brad Pitt's just like, whoa, like, listen, if you're going to get shot, do you want one in the head or two in the chest? And he's just like, what? And he's, I don't want to shoot anybody. He's like, no. If you're going to get shot, one in the head or two in the chest. And he's like, one in the head, I guess. And he's like, you just come in and you drop it flat. Hey, listen, this is how it's going to be. You can't expect that they're going to be happy about it, but don't come in with so many niceties that you dilute down the message of this is a hard conversation. And that's okay. I'm going to be kind and I'm going to be generous and I'm going to be truthful. And we're going to talk about some hard stuff, and that's okay. I like you as a person. I think you're a great human. If you're not able to raise your standards, then it probably isn't going to work here. And that's okay. Like, maybe that's the best thing you could ever do from somebody. All of us have probably lost jobs over time that, we just needed to learn, and that was the learning. So it's good. Okay. Last one, because I don't want to drag this out unnecessarily. This is the spot that you want to keep out of. So Kimberly, coaching calls AMA style. Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's one of those things, like, I love Stephen and Chelsea in the community, so I'll do whatever needs to be done. But when I'm finished with these, they require a minimum of a 20-minute couch nap. Like, it drains me. So before previously, and then when I fill in for Stephen sometimes, like if he's traveling or something, it was like hours long. It was like anyone in the community can come on and ask anything. And that's not my jam. Like, I need an agenda, I need a start and a stop, and I need some notes in between. Like, I need to know what's coming at me. And I just always felt like, so, I don't know, like ill prepared and like, what's coming,
Yeah.
and never felt like I did a great job. Like, the feedback from others was really kind, but I mean, honestly, I'm like, there's an eye out there who's going to love this, and this ain't her. And so now it's structured better. We have an SOP for most of the coaching calls, like not Stephen's. If I have to fill in for him, it's same old, but for the regular coaching calls, it's like we have an SOP for it now. We have like a kind of an end cap, like here's what to expect and here's what to do after. So it's really like only 45 minutes of rapid fire stuff. But I still don't like it because, again, I feel like, gosh, Amazon has changed so much. And I actually handed my Amazon business over to my husband. So I'm really not in it any more than like, okay, someone has a question, I find an answer to it. And I usually Google it or ask another coach. Like, I just don't know this stuff anymore or what's relevant. So I don't know, like, I might think I have the right answer, but I got to double check myself because Amazon could have changed this yesterday and I didn't know. So it gives me anxiety and I don't like to smell like that.
That's good. I love that. I think that's a good thing to identify. This isn't my jam. Like, yeah, we'll all do stuff down here. It's not like you can just have a job where you're not doing things that you don't necessarily like to do. But I think that if the majority of your job lives here, or if large percentage of your job are living in this quadrant, you're not going to last there long, or you're going to begin to poison the well for everybody else that's there because you're unhappy. I like that. The whole idea of lives. Some people like Pedro. Oh my gosh. Like, Pedro lives for this jam. Pedro lives, throw him in the middle of something, don't tell him anything that's going on, and he would love to rapid fire and just like troubleshoot all the way through it. But I think that people like us that are like more like high fact finders were like, was that exact though? And is that really how it is? And so you feel an inauthenticity to get up and say things that you don't know for sure is accurate. Typically the quick start is like, that's majority true, and you can go fact find the rest. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably 75% right. You can go, pick up the extra 25%. Whereas high fact finders, depending on where you're at in the scale, that can be a hard one. So that's good. Any thoughts on that one? Is there any follow-up thought on that? Taryn, Ben, Savannah?
I completely agree.
Yes. Don't put you on the spot. Don't get you on lives. Don't ask you some things in front of people that you're not ready for. Love it. Awesome. Canva tasks. What's this one all about?
So I used to love like what I would call grunge work. I used to love like, give me a vague task and like, let me make something and make it beautiful. And and all this stuff. And I would spend like hours geeking out on it. And I loved that. But now, again, it's almost like this slows me down. Like there's other things that I feel like I can bring more value to the company if I'm not like hanging out in Canva making something the right color purple, you know. And then it requires like back and forth. And so like I submit it and then it's like, okay, when is this person going to see it and give me feedback? And then the back and forth, and I'm just like, it takes too long. Like there are so many other people on our team who are great at this kind of stuff and they love to do it, and I just don't need more. And same thing with coaching. Like I loved it at one time, but it's just not, again, like it's not where I feel like I'm going to bring the most value to the company, and that makes me feel like, oh, I don't need to be doing this, you know.
Yeah, that's good. No, I think that's great. And I think obviously, as previously discussed up to this point, anything like these are like SOPing out how you do coaching calls. I know that they've got already SOPs around that. They don't need it. Lives, they already have some SOPs around that. Campus, anything that lives in this quadrant, the quicker you can SOP it out so you can delegate it down is awesome. Any thoughts or questions? I also have some stuff